Hermit Society, Volume 1, 3 Days of Night. Chapter 2, Sunless. 8:30 a.m. Monday with Lily.
When the sun didn't rise on Monday morning, I couldn't help myself but to think, just as usual. Growing up, I had come to believe that the light of God would never shine on me because I had the soul of a devil living inside. The first time my devoutly religious mother realized that every cut or scrape I obtained playing in the yard was healing immediately, she had taken on an incurable, identity-swallowing guilt over having birthed a witch. She quickly took to the task of hiding me from society with homeschooling, and insisted that I was deathly ill and couldn't be interacted with. At the very least, I can say she took the time to raise and even love me, trying to take the emotional burden of my existence onto herself. But her obsession with hiding me had driven her mad by most standards, and I only trusted her because I'd never known anything else. Luckily, my mother never found out about my other power, that is, to phase through objects. I'd innocuously realized it on my own when I was 8, and decided it was best to keep it a secret so she wouldn't feel any more guilt than she already did. It wasn't until I'd gotten into the throes of puberty some 4 years later that I became restless enough to give it purpose. Deep in the night, I would phase through my bedroom wall and head out in whichever direction I felt like to learn whatever there was to learn about the world outside. It turned out there was a lot more than I'd anticipated. Outside of actually interacting with other people, I figured out as much as I could by phasing into random buildings and studying what went on in them, or using the local library to gather data on their computers, which became particularly worldview altering. When I was just a couple of months from my 15th birthday, I finally managed to mess up my route badly enough to get caught by a police officer and taken back to the house. And when my mother was informed of what I'd done, it was like 15 years of internalized guilt was suddenly ready to be directed on the evil child whom she'd certainly never raised this way. The logic was no longer that I needed to be hidden to protect her shame, but as a service to society, that a devil was being kept off the streets. Of course, locking me away in such a manner that she wasn't paying attention to me anymore only meant I had even more time to sneak out through the walls, and now I even had the courage to do it during the day. This meant, at long last, that I could seek actual human connection and even approach people my own age. That inevitably ended in disaster. I had no idea how to communicate with anyone. I looked, acted, and sounded like a total weirdo by most standards, and everyone else my age had made friends almost exclusively with people they went to school with. Cold approaching strangers was not only incredibly nerve-wracking, but always ended in awkwardness and some degree of revulsion. Before long, my failure had driven me into a depression which became an even greater prison than my mother's house, and that, eventually, is where I secluded myself deliberately. It became a painful irony that I was unable to die, even at my own hand. In the course of hardly interacting for the years which would have been my time in high school, my mother had largely put me out of mind entirely, almost as if her routine of leaving convenience store meals and homeschool assignments at the door was just something she did for no particular reason. As soon as I turned 18, her biblical duty to uphold the laws of her country had reached completion, and I was summarily given a note that just read leave. It was honestly the best birthday present I'd ever received. Initially, I had intended just to find another room to hole myself up in, but surprisingly, having left the only one I'd ever really known, it wasn't a void I could fill so casually. If I really needed anything, I could conceivably just steal it, but since I was never in pain for any reason anyways, the thought had barely occurred to me. Instead, I headed once more to the library and just started researching everything possible about how to live, and was surprised by how much difficulty even regular people seemed to have doing it. There was endless writing on the subject, and no shortage of indication that I was very far from being the only person who felt alienated by the world and unable to communicate. In fact, there was a wealth of people, especially online, who were dedicated to the express task of helping people like that. However, no matter where I looked, I couldn't find any indication that people with powers like mine existed outside of fictitious writing, and no one who I tried to tell about them, no matter how much trust I might have fostered with some of them through online chats, believed me. That is, until I stumbled across the Hermit Society. I found them via the Breckensburg subreddit sometime shortly after discovering the website and learning that most cities have their own message boards there. This was nearly a year and a half after I'd been kicked out of the house. At this point, I'd managed to make a few friends among the library staff and even get hired on by the kindly woman managing it. I'd gotten decent enough at communicating with people both online and off, though I hadn't yet developed much of a personality or a concrete enough set of interests to know what kind of person I ought to seek connection with, or what kind of things I wanted to talk about. Still, I'd gotten comfortable enough with my understanding of net culture to start my own threads, and so I posted one basically asking about where people who particularly don't fit in could look for personal guidance within the city. There were only 3 replies, 2 of which contained the kind of generic advice which I'd already been following for years, while the third, from a user named Doomfinder General, asked me to DM them the details on just what kind of weird I was. As a young woman on the internet, I'd long been made wary of anyone trying to slip into my DMs, but since I'd recently started a new account which hadn't indicated my gender in any way, I figured it was at least unlikely that this person was just a pervert. There was no need to beat around the bush either, since I was only at risk of being laughed at if they didn't believe me, so I told the person that I had the superpowers of immortality in phasing through objects. To my surprise, however, I was not met with ridicule in response. Instead, the message simply read, "You are a doomer. Others are like you. If you'd like an introduction, come to this address any time," followed by the address of a house in the suburbs just a 20-minute drive across town. Needless to say, I was skeptical. In fact, I was pretty damn sure this was a dangerous scam, and I thought it best to write it off immediately. Ergo, I didn't bother responding and continued along believing I was a one-of-a-kind witch who might never be able to foster a trusting relationship. No one was ever going to believe in my powers unless I came out and showed them, and having seen the way my mother reacted to discovering them, there was no way in hell I was going to give that a try, especially to anyone I wanted to like me. Another 6 months passed and I still hadn't made any meaningful connections. My coworkers had invited me to lunch here and there, but we hardly did more than trade pleasantries, and my obvious nervousness seemed to make people uncomfortable. I was 20 years old at this point, but I had the emotional security of a shy middle schooler who just transferred schools midway through the 7th grade, at least going by whose concerns I was most able to relate to in my online forum reading. Every so often, my mind would return to the Doomer DM, and I'd look over Doomfinder General's profile to see that they only ever seemed to post on the Breckensburg subreddit. Perhaps it was an account created solely for the purpose of posting on this board? It mostly seemed to comment on threads about strange occurrences in the town, either to try and offer some kind of rational explanation for them, or asking for more information from the people describing them. I started to feel like this person was maybe just sincerely fascinated with weird things that went on in their hometown, or perhaps some kind of undercover journalist. Whatever the case, I figured it might not be a bad idea to ask for clarification about what exactly a doomer is and what would be waiting for me at the address provided. In the same matter-of-fact fashion as the previous DM and all of Doomfinder General's posts, they responded, "Doomers are people in Breckensburg with special powers, usually including some form of immortality. The address is my house, where several Doomers live and do freelance problem-solving work. We can find you work if you need it, but it doesn't pay well." Confirming that the address was indeed someone's house left me feeling similarly to how I had the first time, but I hadn't expected to hear that there were not only others like me, but several grouped up in one place. It was still difficult to believe, but my curiosity had been piqued much more thoroughly than before, and I wasn't able to put it out of mind. It took me a solid month and a half to work up the courage to go there in person. I warned Doomfinder General of my intended arrival a day ahead of time, and received an affirmative response. Now that I'd said I'd do it, I felt like there was no backing out, so the next day I took the city bus up to the Frog Pond neighborhood. My heart was just about ready to tear itself from my chest and fly away as I knocked on the front door of the house, and doubly so when the door was opened less than 20 seconds later by a handsome young man just a bit older than myself. He had short, stylishly messy, dirty blonde hair, bright green eyes and a boyish face, and was dressed casually in black basketball shorts and a tank top. He smiled warmly and offered a hand to greet me as he introduced himself. "You must be Sunless Lily. I'm Hermes. Come on in." Somehow that short introduction had blasted through so much information that I wasn't sure what to respond to. Explaining the difference in my real name and screen name, greeting Hermes in return, or absolving my reservations about stepping inside. And before I'd processed the decision, I'd somehow been led into the most spectacularly bizarre living room I'd ever seen in all my years of ghosting into people's houses. "First things first," Hermes began. "I don't mean to startle you, but it's probably best I show you something." He was reaching for his pants pocket, and all of my fears were rapidly rushing to the surface, especially when the hand re-emerged holding an open switchblade. Just as the words, "This was a mistake," leapt through my mind, Hermes did the unthinkable and used the knife to slice a huge cut across his own arm. Right as a yelp slid from my throat, I became transfixed on the wound as it immediately began to heal. "See? I'm a doomer too. You were never alone to begin with." Right there on the spot, I fell to the ground and burst into tears.
11:30 p.m., Monday with Mikhail. It was around this time when I realized I was about to spend the rest of my night regretting not having made a move on Lily Moongazer, and since the night apparently wasn't going away anytime soon, that was going to mean a lot of regret. Apparently, she'd started hanging around the Hermit Society just a few months before I joined, but wasn't actually taking any jobs outside of helping out when she happened to be at the house. I hadn't known enough to parse anything besides her very obvious attraction to and fixation on Trayvon, without realizing that his oblivious ass wasn't going to catch on for another 6 months. In that time, I had every opportunity to float my own candidacy, but I'd carelessly presented myself with too much honesty under the assumption that she was my buddy's girlfriend, and now I was already buried up to my neck in the friend zone. Had she merely been attractive as all hell, I could have brushed it off as just another beauty beyond my league, but ever since her 21st birthday, she'd taken interest in alcohol, and I never refused a chance to imbibe someone into a world of the bar. Ordinarily, Lily was quiet enough to be filed away as boring, but when I got a few shots in her the first time last month, she peeled her book open and gave me a dramatic reading from start to finish. Fascinating? Not so much. Certainly relatable, a story I'm sure any doomer could find themselves in, which meant she was more than at home amid the Hermit Society. In my lack of experience, I'd failed to realize how maintaining interest in the story was turning me into a shoulder to cry on, and that very soon this was going to mean relationship counseling for her tryst with my buddy, who'd unintentionally put me in the position of keeping his other sex friend a secret from this love-struck little girl. I don't get the impression she'd give up on him even if I told her, though. To be honest, I didn't mind listening. I had a reputation for my honest counsel, and I was always happy to share drinks with any good company for any reason. This girl just lacked the self-awareness not to wear a low-cut shirt with her pristine ivory C-cups fully visible while talking to a drunken 27-year-old man at a bar who she didn't want to fuck. Maybe she's only into black guys, my mind wandered.
Is it wrong of me to want to insert myself into his life? Maybe he didn't expect any more commitment than this. I feel bad about trying to push my feelings on him, even if I do want to be more to him. Why is dating even harder than talking?
Look, you're being ridiculous to yourself. Your responsibility is not to never infringe on or hurt anyone. That's not how it works. There's not good people and bad people who just give and just take. Everyone's doing both. Just because some bad people take and don't give a shit doesn't mean you can't have anything when you want it. This is why people liked listening to me, because I was always going to tell them to do what they want no matter what and make it sound reasonable to do so. My whole life, things were taken from me, so I made it a personal mission to take back as much as I could. And with tastes as cheap and simple as mine, it's not like I could ever make the same dent in the world that it made on my psyche.
Maybe it's just the alcohol talking, I don't know, but I think I care more about making him happy than I do about making myself happy.
I didn't have the heart to tell Lily that the alcohol wasn't doing a damn thing to her. It rarely works on doomers, in fact, since their bodies are always correcting and healing themselves. All that poison just stays collected in little pockets inside of them until they piss it out. Unlike most of my friends, my body doesn't have any healing properties, even though it's nonetheless true that I cannot die. If you chopped my head off, I wouldn't be able to go on talking, since my windpipe wouldn't be attached to my lungs anymore, but I wouldn't die. Presumably, the head might even be reattachable without too much difficulty, but it wasn't going to happen on its own. Whatever damage I was doing to my body with all this alcohol, it was permanent, but even if my liver failed and my body shut down, something would be keeping me alive until I fixed it. I know this because I got shot in the head once. Even now, just under a couple tufts of hair, you can find the entrance and exit wounds. The bullet took a part of my skull, disrupted bits of my brain, and left a whistling hole through which a whole lot of blood poured while I was looking for something to stop it with. But I did not die. In fact, I didn't even pass out. It hurt a whole hell of a lot more than anything that's ever happened to you, I promise. But eventually the wound calcified, that part of my brain got dry and hard, and I just simply lost a part of myself that used to be there. In exchange, I got the ultimate party trick of pulling objects through my own skull. Normies just think it's a magic trick. Alcohol and I had a beautiful friendship. It could numb both the physical and mental pain this body has brought me, and I figured as long as I could find a new liver and a good surgeon in my 40s, I'd be able to keep our friendship going forever. But Lily here, she was just prone to suggestion. I'd seen her down 6 martinis in a night and go on talking like she'd just had a cup of jasmine tea or something. Even still, the insistence that alcohol was meant to have this kind of social effect was enough to trick her into opening up after a glass or two. You're asking for way too little. Trayvon is a big boy. He doesn't even have powers, but he's out here helping to fight weird monsters and demons and shit. He makes good money. He does whatever he wants with it. Fucks hot girls and sleeps on his own time. Motherfucker needs a little disruption in his life. And what? You think you're gonna drag him down? Fuck that. I'd be ecstatic to have a cutie like you clinging to my coattails. Uh-oh. The alcohol was getting me way too honest. Luckily, Lily was even more socially awkward than I was and didn't seem to notice.
What do you think I should say to him? She asked.
Exactly what you feel. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's going to be my answer every time. It always was.
Okay. I'm going to text him as soon as I get home.
Right after she said this, Lily got quiet and fidgety, and I realized that she was already completely focused on composing her text in her mind and desperate to get home as quickly as possible. It was a little bit annoying, realizing how I basically didn't have her attention anymore, so I decided it was time to dismiss her and look for something else to do. You're not going to get any farther here at the bar, Lily. You should go home and work on your text. I've got a case to get back to anyways. That last part was a lie, but Lily was the kind of girl you could be curtly direct with and she wouldn't take it as an insult at all. If anything, she seemed happy to receive guidance of any kind.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go do it. Thanks, Mikhail.
And in a cloud of cheery energy, she disappeared from the bar. As soon as she was gone, the barkeep put another gin and tonic in front of me, seemingly out of sympathy. I knocked it back in a couple of seconds and then paid off my tab. 4:00 p.m. Tuesday with Sayaka.
Sinking deep and deep into a dreamcast sleep, I can see some seeds of a scene with a stream on Twitch. Scratch itch for a social sitch. What I make kicks and the kids breed this shit. Yeah, I made meme hits. You may know my tits. Can't get good lighting for Instagramming my mammary glands or a nice suntan in the summer when a blackout smacks out the sun. For some it sounds like fun, but run, the jig is up if you jump to rend asunder the blunder of some other creature in your tincture. Surmise time flies when you're 3-in-1. Some like to have fun with a well-hung housemate while I wake with a trace inside I don't hate or like. Pride sparks for Sarah's notes, though. Thorough counts of times she woke. We broke off from that girl, hurled from a whirlwind when she derailed from normal performance. She hailed from somewhere else, but came here when she was 12, and change didn't go so well for the family, to say the least possible I could go into. Serendipity, an outward face who lazes largely and takes dick heartily from some guy that she cares for marginally, she could be seen as our personality, the natural result of what might have come logically. Sarah's never had sex she liked, but relishes in the thought she might, and so is happy with the signs of having been loved for the night. She lies and considers her life, the two forces giving her tides, and releases yet more of the reins to use my brains in that girl's cunt. Meanwhile, I dial back the ennui and get back to work. So much flexing you can do in just 6 hours with a cell phone, a DAW, a Blue Yeti, and just a forward-facing camera on as many apps as the internet bell curve's buying into. I don't need to use my body as lewdly as serendipity does, not to be stuck up, but I just don't get much out of it. Just a bit pumped up for the clickbait, but if it ain't a hater, it's more than just a high-quality foundation on my face that's making him pay attention. It's aesthetic in the edits where the bass turns the bass up. This ain't for fun one bit, but I pride myself on being just legit enough to keep an image while selling just enough to keep these bitches afloat while they float through life. I'm an enterprise in the guise of a single diva working harder than anyone on the scene does. Of course this forced persona is quite divorced from how I think, more like a strategy. The best guess of what could pique some interest on Pinterest while I've barely got enough time to get dressed before buttons need to be pressed, then I'm on to the next. Vexed, though, by questions on my Twitter. Hey, you're in Breckensburg, herder, you okay, girl? No shit, I'm inside telling kids to subscribe to my Twitch show where I stream my songwriting process with my breasts taking up more screen space than the digital audio workstation. That's when a strange advantage came cascading up my chat stream, reaffirming my position of influence above the competition from that other songmaker who astral projects her consciousness for Trayvon's eerie network. I've got tried and true fame where the weirdness comes to you. Real doomer shit. Described in 3 lines that the chat itself paid no mind to was a person, place, and thing asking to bring the latter to the former at the other. To know at all my affiliation with the Hermit Society is a property only of someone with a great conspiratorial ambition. Thankfully, the nature of what was being asked suggested amicable relations and a sincere desire to work together. It was a cry for fangs of justice on Ridgemont at 6, a place I could get to by then right after the stream. After cooping myself up for so long, I was a little worried I'd lose governance along the way, though I abated the pressure by trusting in my sister selves to seize an understanding of the opportunity before tuning out. In the park at the time, on the dot, a kindly, self-serious, and unnatural man briefed me briskly on the nature of the elements conspiring on either side of keeping the night a thing, and a layout of the contributions which I could make to his side if chose to be on it. Internally I did immediately, having no desire for the state of affairs to continue any longer than it needed to, if it only required a slight diversion in my schedule. This isn't to say that I implicitly trusted this individual so much as that their conclusions had been drawn from logical empirical knowledge with convincing evidence, and there was little potential risk in my cooperation parameters. All I would need was to be in the right place to bite the right thing at the right time when the plan was in motion on Wednesday. Trey and Rose were never going to figure out what to do because they weren't relevant to the plan and would only be extraneous to have to keep in the loop at every stage of the operation. Mikhail and Kyla and even the girl who threatens to steal away my body mate's boy toy will be involved, and Hermes has already contributed without even realizing it. I knew all the stakes for everyone and had a firm layout of why information was being distributed in the manner which it was, as much transparency as I could be given without having every step of the plan explained in explicit detail. Odds were on my side to benefit from this, so I assured my liaison of my compliance. All told, the meeting took about an hour and 15 minutes. My daily posting ratio might not even be affected if I focus on multiple bite-sized content pieces as opposed to doing anything long-form tonight. I want to see if I can save the day without costing me a dime. 9:50 p.m. Sunday with Angelique. I don't expect you to understand my reasoning. It's neither only a matter of thinking that my way of going about things may be alien to you, or that the powers at my disposal are literally beyond human ability to explain, but also that even if I laid everything out for you, it would be just straight up more than you can comprehend. All of you are ignorant and most of you are stupid, so I'm not going to bother wasting my time explaining myself. Feel free to attribute what you will likely by now have interpreted as sociopathic malice and arrogance to the motivations behind my actions. At least that way you can follow along with the story without asking questions. This is, after all, a bloody and, to you, immoral story. My actions caused the brutal murder of multiple unsuspecting, innocent, and blameless victims. I did all of the risk calculation by myself, consulted no one, and committed to my actions with full awareness of their consequences. By any moral standard, this is, once more, a story in which I decide who lives and dies, and to what end, without any consideration for consent, and am therefore a murderer. My first and ultimately most impactful action, in that it directly resulted in several predictable deaths, was to release the seal on Philian Marcus's tomb. To accomplish this, I only had to disrupt the structure of the small building on a dimensional level. For me, this is as simple as giving a light push to one of the walls. Secondly, I advised an impressionable youth, one going under the alias Black Cloud Chaser, that he make his powers known. It is unlikely that the youth would have come to this decision on his own, as others like him have entirely kept themselves to secrecy. Lastly, I advised the Malice Bureau on the steps to minimize damage in the wake of the forthcoming incident. This was not out of any obligation to clean up after myself, but simply one last circumstance required towards my ambition. None of what I tell you here is intended as justification or confession, but merely admittance. Eventually, one will appear who needs to know what catalyzed the incident which will have transpired over the last 3 days, and that catalyst will have been me. If that person is reading this, know that you will never find me. 10:22 a.m.
Monday with Hermes. My first encounter with one of the Burpagor's murder scenes was the worst thing I've ever seen. When I arrived at the house, the back door was already open, and I nearly vomited just from the smell wafting out of it. With unusual trepidation for someone who's dealt with as much violence as I have, I crossed the threshold into what I could hardly believe was a place on Earth and not a scene from some edgy video game. I couldn't possibly describe the layout or furniture of the living room. It was absolutely coated in gore. Nothing was discernible. Ceiling, floor, every surface, all of it was dripping, oozing, and lumpy with unrecognizable human pulp. It seemed like an entire room packed with people had exploded from every part of their bodies. Not a single limb or feature or even organ was recognizable, as though a rotating blade in the center of the room had blended a human smoothie into a fine puree. The carnage was so overwhelming that I could feel myself actively getting desensitized to it, darkening and hardening as a person. Moving past the initial shock of the scene before it could paralyze me fully, I immediately swapped gears into searching for what I needed as fast as possible so I could get out of there. The pit in my senses urging me to run away and no longer be involved, I willed into the reassurance that I needed to prevent another incident as rapidly as I possibly could. Up to this point, I had received the following information: that a very ancient and long-sealed manslaughtering monster had been intelligently stalking its way into areas where it could leave scenes like this without anyone noticing. Someone in Trayvon's network had caught on somehow, and it seemed to him that I was the man for the job. Frankly, because I have the strong sense of justice necessary to prioritize this over any other action, and had the suite of powers which could make quick work of it. After all, I'm a walking atomic bomb. Specifically, I can create controlled molecular explosions pretty much wherever I want. I could end anyone's life right now if I wanted to. Volatile? You better believe I am. But I've been surrounded by good people since early in life, and they taught me to be careful. By all rights, you could say I have the mentality of a superhero, but any heroics I get up to are firmly regulated to the shadows. And even if I might be willing to just stop crime as it happens to enter my purview, I don't exactly live in the big city or have any convenient way to cover myself, so wandering the streets looking for trouble would just mean nightly police stops, and thus I do my justice for a living wage at the behest of my contractor and house provider Trayvon. I don't like to sit still, and he keeps me busy when he can, but frankly the kinds of supernatural disturbances which my skill set is balanced for are not so common, nor their prevention in such high demand, to make it a particularly lucrative line of work. We'll talk about how I occupy the overabundant downtime later. What I needed from this blood-soaked hellhole was actually a pile of shit. Yes, literally. We had already figured out an element of the creature's methodology, and one which only angered me even more, that it was targeting hermits, people whom you wouldn't notice were gone, of which there were many in the vast provincial suburbs of Breckensburg, where still the beast had a predilection, it seemed, given that it wasn't targeting the lonely old people who would be the most predictable targets, but consistently seeking people closer to my age. Were every case just like this one, we would have concluded it was after large group living situations, but most of the prior targets had been individual young women. This let us narrow down its potential next targets considerably, but not enough to concretely predict its movements fast enough for my liking. That's why I was here to try and uncover another clue, a suspicion of mine from having dealt with human and inhuman killers so often in my short life. When someone targets young girls, it usually means they have a particular taste. And since no one had bothered digging through its shit at the last few scenes before cleaning them, I was clear that if another scene emerged, I'd be allowed to get there first. I was looking for hair. The pile of shit was left in the kitchen, as it tended to be by prior descriptions of other scenes, and I barely had to atomize my way through it before the beam of my flashlight glinted off strands of amber. Perfect, as niche as it gets, and matching with the one of its other 3 prior victims who we had visual information regarding. The rest was going to be easy, and I was going to be swift and merciless. So, this was Chapter 2 of my story. I apologize for my incredibly inconsistent voice work, particularly as Lily. I didn't have any particular voice in mind. I was just kind of trying to do something appropriate as I read along. But, the way that the section is written, it it like really compresses like her entire life story basically into 4 pages, with certain places that there's more detail and certain places that there's less, so it kind of switches voice in a way. It's like I kind of show multiple facets of these characters, and so I kind of have to like do different voices to match the different facets of the characters, which becomes very complicated, especially when I don't have any kind of standard in mind for how I'm going to do that. I also wanted to talk about the fact that I really had forgotten that this story is full of the word doomer, because the thing is that this was written again in like January of 2019. The doomer meme was like 10 posts on fucking Poll that May was browsing at the time, and she had caught on to the meme. We loved it. We were promoting it through the I Am Games streams, which only had like 50, 60 viewers, but we were saying it all the time. And we made a t-shirt, the Doomer t-shirt, that you can still buy on Tom's site. He even made a new one for a Doom Eternal. It's the Doom logo, but it says Doomer. And he did one for each game. And so, of the new games, I mean. It's fucking sick. May has the Doomer hoodie. It's awesome. At the time, we were trying to push Doomer to become a meme because we just thought it was so good, because like all the Doomer memes were like, oh, this is exactly what my life is like. And so when it started catching on with like the Doomer music and stuff, and the insistence on the Smiths, which I was already a huge fan of the Smiths, and particularly of the song that is the most heavily associated with the Doomer meme, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, is like my favorite Smith song. So like, I love the Doomer meme. But like at the time it wasn't yet a major meme. It was literally like unfucking heard of. Like there was not even any information about it in search, it was barely a thing. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about like continuing this story and also like my thoughts on it. So far, because rereading this, like, I wrote this at a time where I had really become aware of the fact that, like, through reading a lot of my old writing and looking through my old notebooks and like notations on character ideas I had, that like all the stories I had written, all the characters I created could be, seen as just different facets of my personality if they were more like amplified than the ones that maybe are at the forefront of how I act in real life. So it's like when I construct a story, it's like projections of myself through the lenses of other people, and I think that's kind of inherently what our perceptions of people are, and therefore what all of our writing is. You kind of cannot interpret other people except for through the lens of yourself and your own understanding of the world. So like when you project that back outwards, you inevitably bring yourself to it, and that's why every author is all of their characters on some level. Even the bad ones who represent things that they hate about themselves or things that they hate about society that they have to deal with, but through their own understanding of it. It tells you, I wouldn't say it's that the characters necessarily all are them, but that they tell you something about them for sure. And when I was looking through my own characters and realizing like what each of those characters said about me and my perception of the world, it made me kind of want to say, okay, well, like if my writing is always inherently going to sound like me, like no matter what characters I write, they're going to sound like me to some degree, because it's going to be the way I think is going to come through in the characterization. But what if I took different people I know or that I've, dealt with, and like combine them with myself, like create these characters who are born out of like fusions of how I relate to people around me. So like the character Mikhail is basically vanilla Digibro. Like this is, the drunken bearded hobo, trench coat wearing, self-destructive person who feels that like a part of them has been irreparably taken away by society, and as a result they are just going to do whatever they want, and they can't die anyways, so they just kind of are indifferent. Then you have Hermes, and Hermes is kind of partially based on my friend Trevor, if I had to pick one specific person, but like in general, he's kind of a socially conscious sort of SJW type person, but one who's like, you know, he's been through so much shit and seen so much darkness that he's very desensitized, and it's hard for him to be like completely, you know, like Mr. Superhero Boy at all times, even though it's like what he's trying to be. He's kind of channeling his anger from, you know, the like abuse that he suffered throughout his life into fighting bad things that normal people can't deal with, you know, that only his powers can really help with when they really are not useful in most situations. And you got Trayvon, who, you know, we've mostly come to understand through the way other characters perceive him as kind of like this dude who has like, he really wants to help out these doomers and weirdos because he relates to them for some reason that he doesn't completely understand, but like he's just like obsessed with cataloging them and like everything that has to do with these phenomena. And like I almost would compare this character to myself before coming out, in that like I've always been like comically obsessed with trans media. And, like, I've identified myself, you know, as somebody who, you know, had gender dysphoria and has dealt with that since I was a teenager. But, like, the fact that it comes through in so much of the media I consume to, like, an even greater degree than I realized before, like, you know, accepting the idea that I am trans and then, like, looking at all the stuff I like and, like, comparing, you know, the way they describe things to the way that I feel. And, like, you know, I feel like Trayvon is a similar person where it's like he almost doesn't understand why he's not a doomer because they're the only people he relates to, you know? So, yeah, he's obsessed with them, and he hangs out with them and groups them, and also just, you know, wants to just be a badass detective, too. So then you've also got Kyla. This character is... I guess I would consider her to kind of be like almost like my idealized version of myself or something, as somebody who is very willing to just go fucking do shit. Like me at my best, I have a tendency to like rely on other people to determine what I am going to do because I struggle to find like within myself the determination that something is worth doing. You know, like if I am not in that moment inspired or feel like I want this thing to happen in particular, then it's difficult for me to, you know, like out of all the options of things I know could benefit me to do, which is endless, like to pick one and say that is definitively the best thing I could do right now. It's very difficult for me. I need people to tell me what to do, but I will ignore what they tell me if I don't agree or if I think that like they are too off base or if it doesn't seem like it aligns with what I think I should do, you know? And so like when I'm at my best is when I make the determination that, like, I am just going to constantly do things in search of something being the thing that I, you know, wanted to do or needed to do or figured out would work. Because I tend to just run into the answers that way. That, like, you know, by taking this nonlinear path and following my instincts and just like, you know, going about business the way that I feel in the moment, eventually I stumble upon something that, you know, that makes sense. And this is a character who, like, in recognition of this aspect of themselves is like going out of their way to live that as a lifestyle. And like, it's funny because in practice, she's more similar to May and Rosetta Blackwood, who has not had a chapter to herself, but I will have to talk about her. is like my worst tendencies, as opposed to, like, if Kyla is my best tendencies, Rosetta Blackwood is my worst, in that she's a complete shut-in. She's totally autistic. She, like, everything goes over her head. When she gets it into her head that she has to do, like, a job, she will commit herself to the job completely, even if the job is bullshit. Like, she does lots of just random jobs for other people that don't really benefit her that much, just because they give her direction and she's inclined towards taking direction. This is also a trait that I share. She will just do work for days and days, basically. And so even though Kyla likes her personality and her attitude, she doesn't like that she is boring. And so, like, when Rosetta is busy doing stuff and kind of blowing her off, Kyla's like, fuck her, I'm gonna go do my own thing, And me and May can kind of alternate back and forth between being both of those people. But, like, she's better at, like, just commanding herself to go do things, whereas I, like, really need to feel like I have been left alone, before I come to the conclusion that I have to, like, entertain myself. So, but Rosetta Blackwood, to talk about her a little bit more, is Acid Girl. So if you know deep lore, Digibro shit, digi-nee shit now, then Rosetta Blackwood, Acid Girl, is a character that I developed, I was going to make a visual novel, which is way too ambitious, and there's no way I should have even thought of trying to do that. But I also tried to write it as, like, a book or as a script or as various different things. But basically the concept was that this character was a shut-in hikikomori lesbian mixed race beat producer who does, like, Silva Gunner style, like, remixes of, or just, like, mashups, and like triple Q style mashups of video game music and random pop culture stuff. Like, if you actually, I could somehow, I'll put in the description links to the stuff that I actually created under the name Acid Girl, as I had created both the YouTube channel and SoundCloud and made a few of examples of what the content was supposed to be. And the character, the idea of her room was that it would be all blacklit and neon. So everything she has is like neon mindless self-indulgence posters and like all this other shit. And like her stage presence is that she like draws like with highlighter all over her face and and performs in black light. So like basically she's super aesthetically driven, like music producer who spends all of her time locked indoors because she just doesn't know how to interact with her fan base. So yeah, that was a character I came up with at a time when I felt that way, and then I put her into this story because she's a hermit, so it makes sense for her to be in the Hermit Society. So then we got Lily, and she is kind of an amalgam of like all the goth girls I ever knew. Like all like the types of girls that I've been friends with throughout my life are largely ones who had very controlling mothers who, for me, like my mom was not controlling. I was just extremely obedient. Like my upbringing is that like I just followed whatever my parents told me to do because I believed in them, and I like and they were the only people I really like trusted, and I thought everybody else was just wrong about shit, and I was right to think that, but it didn't help me to fit in, whereas like a lot of the girls that I know, they, especially girls who come from like strict Christian households, like I think of Hope, Victor's fiance. I feel like she would probably connect with this character as somebody who, finds this escape from her mom's clutches through the internet. Lily, essentially her power to escape her room and go into the world is a metaphor for the internet that then just becomes her using the internet because, I mean, what else would she do? Phasing through walls, like, sure, you can, like, do stuff, I guess, but, like, if you wanted to learn things, you would just go on the internet. So, that's what she ends up doing. But she's extremely naive because of the fact that she has so few interactions with people. And this is also reflects myself. This is where I connect with these girls, is because I am very, very sincere, very earnest, very, like, naive. I want to believe that people will have my best interest in mind, but I know that it's not the case. But like you know, if I have an inch of trust in somebody, then it's like I will do anything for this person, you know. It's just that difficult for me to have that trust in somebody, and even when I do, it can easily be, you know, abused. So I wanted to present a character who's like a naive, you know, much more naive than I am currently, but you know, certainly somewhere I've been. Which makes it really funny when she interacts with Mikhail, who is the 27-year-old, you know, which I wrote this when I'm currently 28. I'm going to be 29 in a month. So yeah, I was 27 when I wrote this. So like Mikhail was just like the fully jaded current version of me talking to like the youngest possible version of me in the form of Lily, you know, in terms of characters in this story. So that's what I find like adorable about their interactions. And then you've got Sayaka / Serenity / Sarah. So this is a character with 3 personalities. I am extremely fascinated with dissociative identity disorder. I am somebody who definitely dissociates heavily a lot of the time, but I don't necessarily have like another personality that takes over. I don't have that kind of like, you know, I don't feel like I have 2 different selves or 2 different sets of memories or anything like that. It's just like I feel a disconnect from myself, largely I think as a result of dysphoria. You know, I think it's mostly the gender dysphoria and you know, some degree of body dysmorphia as well that causes me to just feel like I am not inhabiting my inner sense of self, and therefore I don't feel like you know, I just don't feel like I am doing a good job of representing my intentions somehow. It's difficult to explain. But in any case, like this character, you know, fully slips into 3 different personalities as a result of the fact that their core personality, in the sense that, you know, they're the one that was the birth name, is Sarah. And I'm going to read you another piece I wrote because the reason I stopped writing this is that I ran up against a wall where I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do next with the plot. The only idea I had was to write this section about Sarah, because I just, you know, basically wrote these one after another as the ideas came to me to, you know, like what I wanted to do with these characters. So I knew what I wanted to do with Sarah, but I didn't know how to work it into the story. So I wrote this part, but it doesn't feel like a part of the story. It's also just really fucking emo. But like, I guess I could read it as an omake. It's already written. It's here. It's edited. It's fine. It just doesn't really have a place in this particular story. So like, I don't really know how to involve it, but I had to write it. So I'll read it and you'll understand Sarah and how she became the way she is. So.
There was a time when I would have just hurt myself for being this way. I'm not like the others. I don't have a hole in my brain. I've never been burned alive or cut in half. I don't know what it's like to die. It is terrifying. It is the worst feeling imaginable. That's why I thought I deserved it. I had no reason to believe I would live. I had no idea what I could recover from. And so I tested the limits day by day with the apple peeler from the kitchen. An inch of skin one day, 2 inches another, and eventually scraping my arm bone dry, screaming, crying, and begging to die. That was a year ago. I feel like I've lived a lifetime since then, and yet I remember it perfectly. I still know how to be that person. If I wanted to do it, I could do it right now. I could embody all that I once was. I could be fucking terrifying. Every so often I wish I was. And every so often I know I deserve it. Because I am not a good person. I have a wealth of hate inside of me that cannot be excused. I am obsessed and compulsed. I will rape and I will eat and I will make worse the world that gave me all I have. I will be the thing I've been told never to be. That should I reveal myself to be it, I would be deemed to burn at the stake. When I kill myself, no one will mourn. No one will be left to feel sympathy after I've burned them all away. And yet, someone came. Someone came to stop the funeral processions. Someone insisted it wasn't my fault. Someone insisted there was more to it. Someone insisted that I was okay. That person is incredibly, unendingly wrong. I can't even say that they're not going to regret this decision, or that they wouldn't already if they knew more about what they're encouraging. But I believe them against my better judgment, and maybe only because they're able to use better words than I can. I'm willing to believe that even if what I'm doing isn't justified, it has purpose in making someone's life better. Maybe I could even say there's a net positive effect for my continued existence. I doubt it. And maybe it's just easier to believe in than the idea that I just have to do the hardest thing in the world and die, even when I should. Maybe I'm truly the worst by deciding to go on as I am. Nevertheless, I am here.
So, yeah, this is the extremely emo personality of a girl who literally carved all the fucking skin and flesh off of her arm to the bone. So, you know, I had that idea that was the core of this whole chapter, was my idea that I wanted this concept of a suicidal immortal who is so self-hating that they have taken to peeling as opposed to cutting. Whereas normal people, who hate themselves will cut their wrists. This person is taking an apple peeler to their arm and grinding it to the fucking bone. In order for me to write in the first person perspective of that character, it was very difficult because I made a bunch of attempts at trying to write this when I first came up with it. It took months before I found, I guess, the mindset to understand what I was trying to communicate about this character. This overwhelming sense of guilt. This sense of guilt over just merely existing. This idea that on some level, you just can't believe that your existence is a net positive, that it could ever be, that it has any potential to not ultimately be a negative influence on the world, and the guilt you feel over that driving you to think that if I killed myself, the world would literally be a better place. And that's what this character is obsessively thinking. And it's not really clear why they believe these things about themselves. I have not thought that far ahead. But they clearly are fucking heavily disturbed. And the result of this trauma is that they split into multiple personalities, one of whom is Serendipity, whom we don't know much about yet, but she basically is just a lazy slut. She kind of just sits around on the couch, has sex with Trayvon, and she basically is somebody who just isn't thinking and is just operating completely on instinct. Whereas Sayaka is the opposite, who is constantly on the grind, always working, basically trying to use up every ounce of time that she has while she is in her personality. So this triality, if you will, is something that certainly represents me fairly well, in that I bounce between being insanely focused, work-oriented, hyperactively, doing tons and tons of shit at once, or being completely incapable of doing anything whatsoever. And then in the middle ground somewhere is obsessively thinking about what I need to do and therefore being sad boy. And that's the area I try to avoid the most. I would rather be either Sayaka or Serendipity than Sarah, But Sarah sort of like has kind of taken a back seat because of the fact that like Hermes has made her feel like Hermes is the one who she's referring to when she says someone came. The friend who has sort of made her feel like it's okay to live. And so she's sort of relinquished more of her control over to the other two because she likes the idea that serendipity is capable of establishing human connections with someone to the level that she has sex, which is why she like literally, as you know, Sayaka describes that she like enjoys finding out that she has had sex, even though she herself cannot enjoy sex or doesn't think she can, at least. Sarah, I mean. Whereas Sayaka doesn't really care about sex at all. She's just a fucking workhorse, but she literally is a titty streamer and like probably an OnlyFans user. I mean, OnlyFans didn't exist yet when I wrote this chapter, or else I certainly would have been using that as my cultural reference point. So that'll probably have to come up later in the story. But yeah, so that's sort of my thought dump on this story in general, really. Like, I was sort of writing by the seat of my pants. I did not have a concrete idea of what the plot was ultimately going to amount to. I've obviously set up lots of threads that I can tie together over the course of it, but so far this represents like a fourth of what I intended to write. I intended for this to be a shorter book, like 40,000 words or less. Let's see how many words there are so far. Okay, there's only 11,000 words. So yeah, this was only going to be like probably 25, 30,000 words for the first book. But it's intended to be a light novel series about the Hermit Society continuing to solve these supernatural mysteries. And the first one is The Case of the 3 Days of Night. And the angle of approach we take is that we just like, we learn like the ending or close to the ending relatively early on. We don't know exactly how this ends. We don't know, you know, what is going to be the result of this whole thing. However, we've gotten to like pretty late in the timeline, and sort of worked our way back, reverse engineering our way to the earlier part of the timeline as we drift these characters in who, you know, we're establishing a lot of their connections to one another, over their actual relevance to the plot, because, you know, the point of this book essentially is to have like a sort of simple plot, something that is like an obvious problem, but one that's not a threat, you know, like it's just the sky is dark. Like nobody really gives a fuck almost, except that it's a problem, but like, what do you fucking do about it? You know, like how do you fix the fact that it's just fucking night all the time all of a sudden? You know, so like I wanted it to be a very absurd problem. And the idea is that like, you know, the plot is just sort of incidentally happening as these characters just ramble about themselves and their perception of like what's going on, because they're all like, essentially this is a story about what makes people hermits, and it's being a fucking you know, either a schizo or a BPD or a narcissist or a bipolar or a fucking dissociative identity, just mental illness. You know, like these are all characters who are completely lost in their own neurosis, and therefore they cannot establish connections to other people, but it's because they have fucking weird superpowers and they've been socially ostracized, and they fucking, you know, the only one who even does like relate to other people still has to keep a distance from most of them because he's seen too much shit and he's also an atomic bomb, you know? So like, yeah, it's a story about a bunch of loners. But anyway, hopefully I didn't like reveal too much of my hand by going into all this extra detail about the characters and stuff. But some people expressed interest in the story's continuation. Some people said it sucked and was pretentious and gay, and both people are right. But you know, my coda as a writer is it's not about being clever. It's about pushing through. It's about getting the ideas out there, because the only way to get better is to practice and to get criticism. And, if you can write something that's fairly entertaining, even if it's not that good, and make the next thing better through the learning process, then why not? So, yeah, I would like to continue this story, even though it's not a priority over Kusomega, which is a much bigger story, but still do it on the side. We'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. Thanks for reading the description.